Welcome to the Virtual Center for the Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility, an ongoing inquiry into American political origins and evolving institutions. The Executive Director of the Virtual Center is Dr. Bill Obrien. He's also your host for this continuing conversation. Here he is now, Dr. Bill Obrien.
Thank you, Agnes, and welcome to this Tuesday edition of the Virtual Center for Study of the Constitution and Civic Responsibility. Today is Tuesday. It is the 9th day of July in the year 2019. I had to check my calendar and check my years and everything else because it's been a few days since we've gone over the date. I had to remember what day it is. That's one thing I've noticed since I retired. So weekends and weekdays become the same. And so it's a little bit difficult to distinguish. You know, you can't tell I can't tell whether today's a Tuesday or a Friday or a Monday or Saturday or what. You know, they all become kind of the same. But anyway, welcome. And we were not able to do a live program yesterday. I had another commitment that I had to fulfill. But we are here today, and I am very, very excited about today's program and tomorrow's program. Primarily because they're live and it gives us an opportunity to interact here online with you. Part of that interaction, of course, is your ability to interact with us. And in order to expedite that, we have an 800 number which you can utilize to get you on the air with us. We would like you to feel comfortable sharing your thoughts, questions, suggestions, concerns, whatever they might be, related to the program and some of the issues we've been dealing with and will be continuing to deal with, by coming on the air with us and sharing your thoughts, not only with me, but with our other listeners as well. Our 800 number is 844-THE-HORN. That translates 844-843-4676. Easy to remember, though, 844-THE-HORN. If you'd like to put your ideas or your thoughts down in an email or in a comment that you can send directly to me via our Facebook page, then we invite you to take advantage of the opportunity to connect with us that way. If you'd like to send me an email, my email address is waobrien906@gmail.com. That's waobrien, OBRIEN 906, all one word, waobrien906 @gmail.com. If you find it more convenient to use the Facebook page, so many of us are on Facebook so many times during the day, that for many of us, Facebook is becoming the most convenient option because it's there anyway, then that is very easy as well. What you would need to do is go to our Facebook page. And the way you get there is to go to the homepage of Facebook, facebook.com, and you'll see a search box at the top of the page. If you type in the Virtual Center for Study of the Constitution, it'll take you directly to our Facebook page. And on that page, you will see a series of postings. And at the end of each posting, there are two computer links. There's a share link and a comment link. If you click on the share link, it sends that particular posting to all your friends in your Facebook account. All of those that you have listed on Facebook as your friends will get a copy of that posting if you click on the share button. If you click on the comment button, it gives you an opportunity to make a comment similar to an email directly to me. It'll come to my Facebook page, my Facebook account. And Facebook will immediately alert me that there has been a comment to one of the postings on our Facebook page. And then Facebook will immediately take me there. And I'll be able to see which posting you chose and then look at your comment. The assumption, of course, is that your comment would be related to that posting. But while that's the assumption, it's not necessarily the requirement. Once you hit that comment button, you are free to comment on any aspect of our program that you are inclined to focus on. It could be that posting, it could be some other issue that we've been dealing with here during our time together. The point is that I get immediate notification from Facebook that your comment is there, and I can immediately go to it and react to it, either by getting back to you or addressing your comment on the air at our next opportunity, which is what I would most like to do, because that's the way we kind of interact back and forth with each other and involve. It's not only one-on-one between you and me, but it becomes one on everybody, because everybody is made aware of your particular thinking on this particular subject, whatever it might be. The point is, we want to expedite, we want to make interaction more and more convenient in order that it becomes more and more frequent. Because the issue, of course, is learning. And the experts tell us, and there's more and more evidence coming forth all the time to document this, that learning happens as a result of interaction amongst a group of learners who share their thinking, share their thoughts, share their concerns, share their objections, share their educated guesses, if you were, on what the best solution to a particular problem might be. And then once you do that, you open up your ideas or your thoughts to other people and give other people an opportunity to react to your thinking, to your thought, to your suggestion, whatever it might be. And that kind of back and forth is the way that all of us learn. And that's really long. Before we came on the air today, Agnes and I were chatting. And let me kind of go off script a little bit here and share something that is somewhat personal. It relates to the meeting that I said, the commitment that I said I had yesterday, which prevented us from doing a live program. Over the last several years, and I think I've mentioned this 2 or 3 times here at the virtual center, I've been involved with a group of colleagues that I taught with for years, both of them extremely competent, extremely qualified, and extremely committed to improving education. These are people, along with me, who truly believe that the solution to many of the problems that we have in our society is best addressed through education, through improved education. And so the issue is, how do you improve education? And over the months, I've been talking about recent efforts here in West Virginia to, quote, reform, unquote, West Virginia public education K through 12. And what you find with many of these so-called reform movements is that they are more or less dressing on the edges of education. Very rarely do these reforms ever get into the classroom itself and what happens there. And that's where education goes on. If you're going to improve education, somehow you got to get into the classroom. And what that means is you got to work with the people who are there, namely the teachers. And you've got to essentially change what goes on in the classrooms for purposes of improving it. And by improving it, we're not talking about improving the delivery. We're talking about improving the results, the student the student performance that results from it. In other words, improving what students learn. Because what we know and what the experts have been telling us for a long time now, and in fact, if you think about it, Plato told us this millennia ago. The way to improve education is to realize that education is not the information delivered to the student. Education is what happens to the student as a result of interacting with that information. In other words, what I lecture on that comes from a textbook or a speech or a letter or a document, a law, whatever it might be, I can tell students what's in that law, what that document says. But until students engage it, until they actually involve themselves in assessing, analyzing, critically looking at the information I've given them, education can't happen. But when they begin to do that, things happen within the mind of the student. In other words, there are what we call cognitive changes that result. That's the education. And that's what the best teachers seek to make happen in the classroom. And that's what we've got to do. And the meeting that I had yesterday deals with a program that, at least at this point, and right now it's on paper, we haven't actually implemented anything yet. But it is envisioned to be an online learning experience, an online institution, if you will, that features online education. And we know that there's an awful lot going on online around the world. Some of it is creditable, some of it is not. Some of it is a scam. And we know that. We hear all the time about students who are so desperate to improve their lives and their future, the prospects of their future, that they fall for what too often are blind alleys, if you will, that lead nowhere other than debt, other than the fact that these cost people a lot of money and take them nowhere. We want to be different. And we want our approach to be different. And so the issue is, how do we distinguish our approach online from what other people are doing online? And the only way to make it different is to affect positively the learning experience of students. What we are teaching has to be introduced online in such a way that students have to be prompted to engage it and to allow the process of learning to begin. I can't do it. Bill, every student enrolled has to do it. Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I'm going to connect Horston.
Oh, great.
Hold on one second.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you.
Bear with me just 1 second.
That's okay. Believe me, I'm not in a hurry. This is worth waiting for.
Agnes, you there?
Hold on 1 second, Horace. My technology is not working like I want it to, so hold on 1 second.
I'm with you. Ooh, boy.
I'm looking forward to hearing from him, and I know our other listeners are as well. So that's what Agnes is trying to do right now, is make that connection.
I'm still working with it, Bill. Evidently,
Okay.
Skype really hates me, and I'm incompetent, so I'm working on it here.
Well, that's quite a combination, right?
Oh,
well, listen, do you want me to continue until you're ready, or what?
Yes, let me see if I can get this connected.
Okay,
So go right
then
ahead.
let me. All right, then I'll just go on and finish the thought that I was involved in.
Thank you. I thought it was going to be easier, but
oh, I understand. No problem. It'd be impossible for me. So, believe me, whatever you can do is wonderful.
Thank you, Bill.
Okay. But anyway, we were talking about learning, and we were talking about the challenges of transposing the learning process and somehow integrating it into online instruction. It is a challenge that I believe nobody has successfully quite accomplished yet. But there is a way to come close to it. And we've come up with that way, we think. And what we're talking about is looking at an opportunity to present itself, which would give us an opportunity to test out this particular approach. And that's what the meeting yesterday was about. And the challenge that we've got is, how do you initiate an online learning experience and incorporate the kind of things that we're talking about that seem to almost demand a traditional in-class interactive live experience? How do you do that? How do you bring those two things together? Well, it turns out that some time ago, 25 to 30 years ago, a number of institutions, real high quality institutions, the most notable one being MIT, initiated a process that, while it does not totally duplicate the human interactive learning experience, it comes close to it. And like hand grenades, I think close is probably the best we're going to be able to do with online. And that particular experience is what we call lecture capture. And what that means is, and this is what we're meeting about, whether in fact we can actually do an on-site class experience with real people in the room. And what I'm talking about is not only audio, but video as well. What we're talking about is finding a way to take what we do here at the virtual center and transpose it to the classroom and videotape the process as it happens. And that means videotaping the interactions that go on between live students who challenge each other, who question each other, who contradict each other, who support each other, who raise issues, raise questions, raise impossibilities, raise alternative possibilities, and test out those possibilities by giving others the opportunity to react to them. And out of this interactive process, which is what I was talking about at the very beginning when we shared the 800 number with you, through that interactive process, learning happens because people are all actively engaged. Everybody is involved, and everybody is processing new ideas and new suggestions as they are made and sometimes rejected as not being realistic or possible or reasonable or whatever. But the sum total is through the process of adding and subtracting and altering and changing and replacing and supplementing and all the rest of it. Everybody comes out of that experience having learned more than they had when they went in. Education has really happened. And what we're talking about doing is videotaping that process as it happens. And then making that process either using the internet with online video or in places where the internet is not readily accessible, DVDs, where we actually cut a DVD, which includes the particular learning experience we talked about, and making that available to online students. And that becomes part of the instructional content of the course. Wherever students are learning, not only do they get the information, not only do they read the textbooks and the documents and all the rest of it, but they are also privy to watching other students in the process of learning as they take on that particular piece of information or content. And that clearly supplements their ability to understand the complications involved in a particular issue. And if you structure the information carefully, if you organize it in such a way that the learning experience becomes progressively more and more intricate and more and more involved, by the time that you get to the end of a particular course, you're dealing with a bunch of people whose learning has been enhanced incredibly as a result of the experience. What you have done is not only reach the point where you have students that understand things they didn't understand before, but you're also experiencing a group of students who not only have learned new things, they have also learned how to learn these new things. In other words, through the process of learning itself, they have become self-learners. They can take that learning experience away and apply it in a totally different context to a whole different body of information. But now they know how to deal with information, how to confront information, the kinds of questions to ask about that information. In other words, they've become self-learners. And once you create a self-learner, you've created somebody who'll continue to learn new things for the rest of their lives because they know how to do it. And so if that process becomes the general education experience of an institution. Now, I don't care if an institution teaches technology, high-powered math theory, whatever it is. If you have students grounded in the learning experience through having taken courses like this, general education courses like this, you're dealing with accomplished learners who are not defeated by anything, no matter what the learning challenge might be in the future. Instead of running from challenge, they embrace it because they know how to deal and they know how to master it. And that's what the whole learning process is about, we believe. And we're trying to establish that.
I believe Horst is connected in now, Bill.
Okay, that's great. I think that would be wonderful because I just finished that thought.
Are you there, Horst?
Horst, are you there? Hello?
Okay, maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah. I think I'm here.
Okay,
I
here
have
we
it,
go.
shut down.
There we go.
Yeah.
I can hear you.
Sorry about that.
How are you?
Hey, Dr. Bill. God,
how are you? My God, how long? How long?
Whew, it's been a while, bud.
I'll tell
It's
you.
been a while.
Tell me what's going on. What have you been doing?
I've been working my guts out for basically since April to May or something like that, up until I've just hit my vacation.
We lost you there. Hello?
Sorry. I hit the mute button. You hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Okay. No, yeah.
So since April, May.
No, I've been working like every day and every night from 7 a.m. and I don't get back to like 11 o'clock, 11:30 p.m. And it's been a pretty grueling. Yeah, it's been a
Wow.
But
so are you still teaching English as a second language?
Well, yeah. For the most part, this last semester, I took a job as a junior high teacher, teaching things like social studies and literature and stuff like that. So that was kind of a step up for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a big step up. That's a totally different experience.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
And for a person with my credentials, you wouldn't normally get to do that, except I was working for private schools, and so I had a leg in. So
yeah. So that's been keeping you pretty busy.
Well, they kept me busy up till basically last week. The beginning of July was the start of my summer vacation, and I had to schedule a surgery to take care of some stuff from last year.
Oh.
No, it's hard to get into. It's all right.
That's all right. That's okay. So are you on the mend now? Are you on the rebound or?
No, I'm doing great. I've been listening to you and your show and Bob and really keeping up as best I can and really enjoying everything. So.
Oh, that's great. That's great. That is great. So share with us again. We're on live. So what time is it where you are?
Oh, it's getting on to about 1:30 in the morning.
All right. Yes, we're 1:30 in the afternoon.
You're right. At this particular point in time, we're
you're crashed by the time we even come on the air.
Well, for the last 3 months or so, if I haven't been at work or commuting to work, I have been like crashed.
You've been trying to crash, yeah.
yeah, trying. Oh, that's an operative word right there, Dr. Bill.
Yeah.
That's important.
Oh my. So what kind of things have you been besides that, which is obviously more than full time? I'm wondering about other things that have kind of struck your fancy, because I know you're kind of, to me, you're one of the so-called Jefferson used to be referred to as a universal man or something, because he had so many different interests, and you do as well. And one of the things I've known since I first came into contact with you, that your interests are varied. You don't seem to totally focus exclusively on just one thing or one set of things. But,
well, no, I guess that's in one sense that's accurate, but on the other hand, you kind of flatter me, Dr. Bill. I mean,
well, no. I think the mere fact that you talk about this upgrade you've had to middle school or junior, middle school age students, and now you're teaching social studies and literature and all the rest of it. I mean, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. That takes you in any number of different directions.
Oh well, sure, that's true. And
Yeah.
I have my own particular career trajectory that goes this way and that way. But yeah, for the most part, I wanted to call in and talk to you about your conversation with your friend Kevin from last week.
Great. Okay. Yeah,
because that hits me like where I live.
Well, I know that, and I had told him that you had made the comment one of the last times we talked, that in his previous appearance here, you said you would listen to it like 3 different times or something.
Sure.
That and he was kind of encouraged. He found that really rewarding and encouraging that there was somebody out there that was that interested in what he was saying. And I said, well, you live there. And, and I told him that you live there on site, so to speak. And he was there doing conferences and giving papers and all of that. So I think he was in Taiwan for a few days, I think he said. So what was some of the things that you reacted specifically to, Horst?
Well, for one thing, I did actually have to delve back into the early history of Deng Xiaoping, for example, and because I knew this is one of those things like when you live in I have been in Taiwan for almost 18 years now, and you would expect the person that lives in a locality would have a sense of the local politics and like a sense of the history, at least up to that point.
Right.
And it's kind of funny because when I first came here, I mean, all of that kind of got hijacked by 9/11 because because I came here in 2001 and my plane was originally scheduled to depart on 9/13, and as you know, as everybody knows. All air traffic was canceled for like a week or something like that after 9/11. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, and I was, I will never forget the dates of like when I left and when I arrived here because of that, these are weird little things. So.
Yeah, talk about a marker.
No, yeah. It really does. When do you? Where were you when this happened?
Where were you exactly?
Yeah. I was on my friend's porch calling the airline, like figuring out, when am I going to get out of here?
What am I going to do? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So wow. What were some of the things about Deng Xiaoping that you had to do some backtracking on, checking on? What was it you were primarily interested in, or what prompted your search?
Well, I knew he was a major figure in Chinese history, and like when I graduated from high school, just about around that time, I took a summer class around the time that the Tiananmen Square incident occurred in 1989.
1989, yeah.
Right. And when I heard you and Kevin talking about that, it was really interesting to me to hear some of the background stuff that he was filling in.
Yes.
But on top of that, I mean, like, I know that Deng was the person that basically set in motion, or he was the architect of some kind of system where when he stepped down, someone else would come in and step in and take his place, and someone else would step in and take their place.
Right.
Which to me is like, from a democratic perspective, that's kind of a weird thing.
Yeah.
Like, who would do that in the first place? But at the same time, it's like when you see like a person like Xi step in and throw all that away, it makes sense, doesn't it? I mean,
yeah. So what we got was Xi was not somebody who came in and picked up where the last regime left off and just continued the same thing, but was committed to changing a lot of it.
I don't really know what Xi's story is. I have been researching Deng. Deng is a person who actually is a contemporary of Mao for the most part. He goes all the way back. I mean, he goes all the way back. He was 15 years old in like the early beginning of 1920s, and he went to study in France. And I see parallels between him and, like, if you look at Japan and look at the Meiji Emperor, like in the 1860s, something like that, where suddenly there's like this awareness that we have fallen behind the Western world and we have to catch up in a hurry, and it's a crisis situation. And that's what motivated Deng when he went to France. He was there to, like, find ways to learn from the Western world to take that back to China and save them. And he got in trouble with Mao numerous times. I don't even really know how he evaded, like, getting imprisoned or worse. But a few times he got demoted. He got stripped of his titles because he had ideas about economic reforms that did not comport with Mao's communist ideals.
I see.
Yeah, it's really strange. So, Kevin said that he was like striding. He was like, striding the backs of two beasts. Like on the left you have like the communist machinery, and on the right you have like this new, I don't even know what you call it, capitalist kind of intervention or something like that.
Right.
No, it's not. It's no joke. He really, really did do all that.
I see. So from the difference between Deng and Mao is that Mao is pretty much focused on implementing a cultural philosophical system on China. Deng is talking about the kind of economic reforms that enabled China to become a competitor with the West. Is that am I right?
I think that's fair. Fair. I'm not really sure, and I needed to dig down into like what actually motivated Mao, but for the most part, he seems to be like a true believer. And you have to remember that Mao emerged in competition with Chiang Kai-shek, which is how I get here in Taiwan. But that doctrinaire communism is something that I don't think that Deng ever subscribed to in the beginning, from the beginning, rather.
I see.
I think he was always more a type that was looking to the West to copy, to imitate economic models that would elevate China to the status of a major industrial power.
I see.
And he actually got into power. Well, one of the reasons why they could have dispensed with Deng like early in the 70s or something like that. But one of the things that saved this hide that is that the Great Leap Forward, the Cultural Revolution, actually was disastrous on a number of levels, and he was there to kind of criticize that. He was still standing. He was like one of the guys that was still there, like in the late 70s.
Right.
They could say, "Oh, you know what? This didn't work out too well, guys," and at that point, Mao's personal power was on the wane. He was a cultural icon, but he was not politically, he didn't really have that much power. So, yeah.
Wow.
There is so much when you start digging into the details. It's an endless. It just goes down and down and down.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because when Kevin was with us, I think, and I'm trying to think back. It was a couple of weeks ago, but it seems to me most of Kevin's focus was on the contrast between Deng and Xi, rather than between Mao and Deng.
Right.
That because he seemed to be focusing on what Xi is trying to do in order to reverse some of the reforms that Deng put into place.
Right.
I think Kevin's thinking is that Xi believes that Deng went too far in terms of economic reform, and that there was some danger that the philosophical basis of communism could get lost in the shuffle, and he's been desperately trying to go back and revisit that and reestablish that. I don't know. Do you see any of that?
Well, I don't really know so much about Xi himself. I have a hard time believing that he's a true believer in the doctrinaire communist hardline. I don't think anyone has bought into that since like the 1960s in China. It has not really been a thing there. I think Xi is more into the totalitarian model of governance. I think he is just a guy who has found a way to pull all the power to himself.
I see.
And he is using a mixed model of, and this is the thing that bothers me the most about China. Well, the most. There's a lot of things that bother me about China.
Yeah.
But one of the things that disturbs me the most about China is that they are ideally suited to support a mostly capitalistic mode economy, basically, but with the supervision, the oversight of a government that can just arbitrarily cut everybody off one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
They can do things that we can't do in America, for example, by capitalism. If you look at it in I don't know, in an isolated sense, could run away in a I don't know, like an analogy would be like a tumor, a cancerous growth, right? Like,
right.
Things grow up. The people with the money get like too much money, too fast. They get too much influence, and next thing you know, it's all over. China is in a position that they can actually they can cut that off.
I see what you're saying.
That's something that's been bothering me for a few years, and I think that's where they are now. China has not been they've not been communistic since Deng. Deng's reforms really took China out of the pure communism model, and that was one of the reasons why he was ejected from Mao's government back in the 70s, because he was not ideologically pure. He had his own ideas about, economic reforms, stuff like that, and it didn't work for them. So, yeah.
Wow. I mean, I've got there's so many things going through my mind just based on what you said, because I'm wondering, one of the things that occurred to me was how much of this didn't we know as it was going on? In other words, it would seem to me that as a nation that had a deep interest in what goes on in China with China, then knowing that this kind of thing was going on at the time would have helped us formulate policy. But I'm not too sure that we really did know. I just don't know. I think what what I see from this perspective is that when China became an economic force that seemed to challenge us on the world stage, that's when interest in China here began to peak. But that up until that time, there just wasn't that much interest in not only in China but in the East, in the Far East as a whole. I really think that what interest we had in the Far East pretty much focused on Japan, because Japan seemed to be more like us. I mean, their economy in the 80s was booming, and I can remember reading books about how Japan seemed to have found the answers to questions that we couldn't figure out for ourselves, and that we would be better off going over and watch, copying some of the things that Japan's doing, because they solve problems that we've never been able to solve. I remember one of the things that seemed to grab a lot of people at the time was the idea that Japan was offering lifetime employment to employees. In other words, taking away the insecurity that would come with fear of losing your job, or having your job grow and develop to the point that your skills became outdated. Employers committed to the security and the future of their employees in Japan, and it was seeming to have a very positive impact. And I remember people in this country were talking about, we would be wise to imitate a lot of those reforms that Japan was instituting. But I don't think anybody was focusing on China, as far as I remember. I could be wrong, but it just didn't seem to me, as I think back, that I remember when I used to read all the books about business success and stuff. If you remember the series, the In Search of Excellence, or something that Peters put out, and how popular that was, and how much of that was incorporating ideas that were being tried out as successfully in Japan, for example. But people weren't talking much about China at that time at all, as I remember. But again, my memory could be flawed. I'm not really sure.
No, I think what you're talking about is more like popular perceptions, but I mean, like, we're talking about policy initiatives that were undertaken by Richard Nixon back in the 60s and Henry Kissinger. I mean, like, and whether, how long it those things to bubble out into the popular consciousness,
right.
10, 20 years later. That is such a complex process that I couldn't even tell you. I have no idea.
Right. Right.
But in terms of trade policy, though, I'm just that was there was so much going on there. I didn't even know where to begin. Yeah. But I guess. In terms of where we are now, I worry about Xi because he is getting to be one of these figures that is allocating all these powers to himself, and he is basically broken through. Some of us in America have kind of bated breath, wondering, what can Donald Trump not do? Is there a wall that he can't break through?
Yes.
And Xi has broken through those walls.
Right.
He's already done it. He's already done that.
And Trump has praised that. I mean, when Xi was able to essentially establish himself as, in power up until 2023 or whatever the date is, I don't know. In other words, and the idea that there were term limits on his regime. He took away the term limits and theoretically created a situation where he could stay in power as long as he chooses to. And right. Trump made the comment and said, wouldn't that be great? Or maybe we ought to think about something like that here or something. And some people are actually speculating that might become a reality in 2020 if he somehow happens to lose his bid to get reelected. The fact that he might not leave. And
Nah.
I mean, it was a remote, bizarre possibility 6 months ago in the minds of many people. But more and more, it's being discussed seriously as a crisis that we're going to have to deal with.
These
And
things to me strike me as like test balloons from the Republican Party. I mean, like I felt this same way back when George Bush was about to step down and hand it over to Barack Obama. And I mean, I don't want to sound like a fabulist or anything like that, but I mean, like,
yeah,
but I was genuinely worried. I mean, like until Obama was sworn in, I was seriously concerned. I thought that there was a possibility that there might be a terrorist attack during
uh-huh.
the election or something like that,
Right.
or there would be a thing and something like a national emergency would be declared, and so we have a national emergency, and now look at what kinds of things are we discussing national emergencies with a border? There's a border crisis. There's a
Right.
national emergency. No, there's not.
No.
No.
Right.
But when you declare a national emergency, you have all these powers, and that's back in the good old days with George Bush. That's what I was worried about. I thought they would declare a national emergency to cancel the elections.
The elections. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Nowadays we have God knows. I mean, you can just declare a national emergency if you want to like pay for dinner.
Yeah.
I don't even
Yeah.
know. I mean, like
Yeah.
it's just ridiculous.
Yeah. No, but I think you're right, and I think people are realistically beginning to speculate on what might happen in 2020 based on these kinds of things, which are not just remote possibilities, but in the minds of many people, they become realistic likelihoods. One of the things that I had on my desk here in preparation for the program was a statement by Lawrence Tribe at Harvard, a constitutional scholar at Harvard, and he raises serious possibilities of this. And he said, actually, it's more than the problem. What would happen if Trump loses the election and refuses to leave? And he raises the possibility, what if Trump is reelected, and then there is all sorts of evidence to surface that the Russians or the Chinese or whoever interfered with the election to the point that the results are illegitimate. Why, if Trump gets reelected and you find out that the election was tampered with, how do you get rid of him? And Tribe raises that question. And the fact that they're even raising these questions suggests to me that this has gone way beyond the point of being remote possibilities and becoming realistic likelihoods that something might just happen. And if it does, it's going to be very, very difficult for this nation, for this political system to deal with it. And that's kind of where we are. And we've got a president that'll do it. And one of the things that's going on right now, you probably know this, Horst, but one of the things that's front and center right now is this adding the census question to the 2020 census. The Supreme Court said no, and Trump's response is the Supreme Court is wrong.
Yeah. Oh, we found a way. It's all right. We say yes.
And just yesterday, Trump's Attorney General Barr agreed with him and said, I agree with the president. I think the Supreme Court was wrong. And I think that the president does have the authority to add a citizenship question to the 2020 census. And coming out of the White House is the idea that the president has pretty much focused on the fact that he would basically declare and order the Commerce Department to put that question on the 2020 census as an example of executive power, that as the president, he has the authority to mandate that, irrespective of what the Supreme Court says. So if that's true, then that is a classic example of the president saying and believing that he's above the law. The Supreme Court is the branch of government that tells us what the law is, and the president is saying, oh, no, in this case, they're wrong. I'm the one that tells you what the law is, and by executive order, I'm going to mandate that it happen.
Right.
So we're there. We are there.
And it's not the first instance of this. Every time he instructs a member of his cabinet or his team to refuse a subpoena, I mean, it's the same thing, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, it sure is.
It's completely defying the law. We are above all this stuff, and I don't even know if the phrase "constitutional crisis" has any currency anymore. But to the extent that it does, we're passed the smell test like a long time ago.
A long time ago,
yeah.
And so the fact is, and what bothers me, and I've been thinking about this a lot, is that the longer he continues to do these things and not be challenged on them, the more brazen he becomes.
We can challenge him, but this again, and actually, this is something that occurred to me way back in the George W. Bush days. And this is something, to me, this is like the Dick Cheney principle. If you remember way back when someone was going to serve a subpoena to Dick Cheney, and the serving officer was told that they had to pass a security checkpoint into the building where Dick Cheney was. And they were told, like, we will arrest you, we'll stop you if you try to proceed past this point.
Mm-hmm.
And it was basically that. It's like, you can't serve a subpoena to him because the person who carries the papers just did not have a possibility of carrying it to them.
The proper authorization.
That to me, yeah. And also at the same time, like I feel almost nostalgic for the times, like where the outrages only occurred every day or two.
Yeah.
Back in the Bush days, I mean, all these illegal things would happen all the time, but there was nobody there to challenge it.
No.
Or in the case of the Dick Cheney example I just gave you, there was no enforcing authority, and that's really the major hole that we have in the constitutional apparatus that we have, is there is nothing to enforce. What happens when someone says no?
No, exactly.
What happens when someone says no? I'm sorry, I'm not going to, okay, fine. So I'm in violation of your principle. What are you going to do? And nobody knows what to do. There is nothing for them to do.
No. And part of the reason for that is in the Constitution itself, because the president is the person that the Constitution gives the authority to enforce. And if he's the one against whom you're looking for a power to enforce, it's not there. There's no way, doesn't seem like there's any way to stop him. One of the things that concerned me, and I hadn't even thought of this, was the fact that in the election, just speculate, assume he loses the election and refuses to leave.
Right.
The fact of the matter is he's still commander-in-chief until January 20th of 2021. He controls the military.
Right. That's a worry, isn't it?
And the military, it was clear last week when the president got his parade, his 4th of July parade, the military is going to do whatever he orders them to do, even if they don't want to do it. And it was very clear that the military was not in favor of this parade, but they did it. Wow. And they were silent in their concern about doing it. They just did it. And so the fact of the matter is, from the first Tuesday in November, when the election is held, until the 20th of the following January, he controls the military. Now, you can take some solace that as of January 20th the next year, He's no longer commander-in-chief, and therefore he loses his authority over the military. But holy hell, what could happen in the interim between the beginning of November and the 20th of January?
Well, Dr. Bell, I would not worry too much about the military writ large. I think, no, as you said, like you could tell they were not happy about it, but they did it because they're following orders, because that's what the military does.
Yeah.
But the military would not, writ large, the military would not follow orders to overthrow.
No, I think realistically you're right. I have to. I want to believe that.
No. But you do raise a legitimate concern that our military is permeated by a lot of, gangs and white supremacist groups and all kinds of stuff, as are our police forces all up and down. That's the thing we have to worry about.
Right.
I think it's a relatively small percentage. It's probably like 10, 12, 13%, but it's not.
But it's a well organized, ideologically committed 12 or 13%.
Absolutely. And when you have a critical mass, you can accomplish all kinds of things.
Lenin used to say that what you need is a committed minority, not the majority.
No.
Because the majority is not committed to anything enough to stand up to you. And the fact of the matter is that may be what we're dealing with. A lot of this has surfaced recently, and when you mentioned the police, for example, in some of these Facebook things on Facebook about anti-gay and anti-LBGQ and all of these anti-women and these horrendous Facebook entries that come up that have been put on there by members of the police department, criticizing and very racially sensitive, very racially disgusting postings, and these are people that wear uniforms and wield power as a result. And these things frighten me, because you're right. There's a minority within the military and within the police that it's really frightening. And President Trump more than once has made reference to his support within these groups.
Oh no, he appeals to them directly.
Yeah.
When you're putting them into the back seat of the car, smash their head into the top.
Into the top.
Why be gentle?
Why put your hand up there and to shield them from hitting the head? Oh yeah.
That's 2 years ago.
Yeah. So so there are a lot of things that if you begin to, when you begin to think a little bit beyond the circumstances or the situation at hand, and you begin to think about the long-term implications of these things, you become really concerned. One of the things that I heard, it was since the last program we've done, and it was the other day, and I heard this, and it was just kind of a matter-of-fact statement that I heard one of the people in the media make, and I reacted to it, but I don't know that anybody else did. And they were talking about the prospects for the Democratic candidates in 2020. And what they talked about was the fact that the Republican National Committee had announced that as far as campaign fundraising was concerned, President Trump's reelection campaign kitty had $100 million in it. That in a sense, the reelect Trump committee can lay their hands on $100 million to get him reelected. $100 million. And so, the questions that immediately started to occur to me is, where are most of those donations, big donations, coming from? And you begin to speculate the most likely sources for those. And then you begin to think about the American electorate and to how vulnerable and how malleable the electorate is, and how important money is in running our campaign. Look at Kentucky. Look at McConnell's power to get reelected in the state of Kentucky. Apparently people don't acknowledge that they like him, but he keeps getting reelected. And part of the reason is because he's had an unlimited war chest financially A lot of it, it seems to me, attributable to his wife and his wife's family connections in Hong Kong. But
Mhm.
but whatever. The point is that money in our election system talks big time. I think Citizens United made it very clear that, as a result of what's happened since Citizens United, we've seen the power of big money in our elections. We see it in the gerrymandering decision that the Supreme Court reached on the last day of its session a couple of weeks ago. There are things happening that are going to make getting this guy out of office really difficult. And it's almost impossible to conceive of getting McConnell out of office. And when you look at both of those things, I heard a discussion this morning that said that actually it would be easier to defeat Trump in 2020 than it's going to be to defeat McConnell. And
Well, sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, go.
Oh no, I was saying getting Trump out in 2020 shouldn't be that big a deal as long as the votes are counted fairly and the Electoral College stays more or less the same. But beyond that, the Senate, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
McConnell, who knows? Well, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was listening to you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Go right ahead because I want you to finish.
I'm still gathering my thoughts.
No, that's fine. I mean, and I have a lot too, and they're floating around there, and I wonder. I mean, I see evidences of efforts to suppress voting in a number of different places, and I see them being successful. The one I put this on Facebook recently. In Florida, for example, the legislature restored the rights of felons once they have served their time to vote.
Right.
And
that happened like in 2016.
That
was almost 2 years ago.
That increased the likelihood of the electorate by more than 100,000 people.
Right.
But since then, the Republicans in Florida legislature have imposed limitations on that right to vote, requiring that felons, even after they serve their time, are responsible for paying the court costs of their own convictions. And until they clear the bill, they can't get their voting rights back.
No, they always find these endless, and that's what is so important about the GOP chokehold on local government. If you have local government, you can make look. We are back to the days of Jim Crow and the Reconstruction, basically.
Yep.
I mean, like, you could say we have the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, and if you were like in the southern state, you could like pass all your local laws to make these things happen. We are looking at the same situation here, basically. Local government is putting all this stuff into cement. It's just,
if you can remember a couple of years ago, we were talking on this program a couple of years ago about the fact that while the Democrats continued to focus on the national government, Republicans were looking to grab control of state legislatures and state houses. And the result was that the Republicans were taking over 2/3, 3/4 of all the state governments and what the potential of that might be. And now we're seeing it, I think.
Oh, no. And I think in that context, we were talking more about a referendum on a constitutional
convention.
Congress. Yeah, convention, right?
Right.
But at the same time, like when you have that much control over state houses, you can, oh gosh, Democrats don't seem to really understand how much control or how powerful that is.
I believe that. I really do. It's bothered me for some time that Democrats haven't, although I'm beginning to read indications now that Democrats are really beginning to appreciate the power that the Republicans have by, at the state level. And, for example, I heard people talking this morning about nobody has the authority to do this. But what they were talking about were these 20 some odd candidates running for president. And many of them could win Senate seats in their states if they would give up this pipe dream about getting elected president. Bullock in Montana, for example, Beto O'Rourke in Texas. These people could take a Senate seat because they demonstrated that they had that much power even in red states. But instead of that, they've kind of decided they all want to beat Trump. And the fact of the matter is, as a result of that, whether they beat Trump or not, the Republicans are likely to hold on to the Senate. And the only way to initiate change in the country would be to break Republican control of the Senate, because the Senate is obstructing everything. So how do you get the Democratic Party to appreciate that? And how do you, even if they do appreciate it, how do you implement it? How do you get the Steve Bullocks and Beto O'Rourke's and these other people? One of the people I've heard of is Hickenlooper, the former governor of Colorado, who would have a good chance to be elected to the Senate from Colorado if he wasn't a candidate for president.
Right.
And so the question is, how do you move him? How do you reason with him? How do you get him to say, look, I heard rumors that, and I don't know whether this is true, whether it's happened or not, but word was yesterday that the Republican congressman from California that's running for president, the last one is on television all the time. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now, was going to hold a press conference, and people thought that he was going to withdraw from the race because since he sits on the Judiciary and the Intelligence Committee in Congress, he's suddenly come to realize that he can make more impact nationally there than he can running for and losing the nomination for the White House. And then in the process, losing his congressional seat as well. And so, now the question is, when you get people like Hickenlooper and Bullock and O'Rourke and these people, if they would come around to the same reasoning about the Senate, then 2020, it seems to me, would look a lot more positive. I'd be a lot more optimistic about it than I am right now, because that $100 million bankroll that the Republicans have at their disposal scares me, because you can buy a lot of advertising that way, and the public will buy into advertising. They'll believe whatever they hear on television or whatever they read. I mean, if it's in print, if somebody says it, they'll do it. And that really bothers me.
I'm not so worried about the money in Donald Trump's favor as far as it goes. If those are advertising dollars spent on Donald Trump, I think, and my assumptions have been shaken somewhat this last weekend, but for the most part, I think he has a solid floor. Nobody is going to vote for Donald Trump in 2020 who is not going to vote for him right now. Advertising is not going to sway them. It's not going to move them, because the people that want him to be president do not, well, I'm not going to say they don't respond to advertising, but if you are not a Donald Trump voter, you are not a person who is going to be moved by an advertisement to change your mind. That is not going to happen. Pure and simple. So they can throw all their money all the way down there as far as they want to go. I think that's my feeling. But if they put those advertising dollars into like Senate races and congressional races, now we have a problem.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about that. But I don't know how these things are structured in a certain way. I mean, like if you donate to the Trump campaign, can they funnel it to down ticket races. Maybe they can. I'm not really sure about that.
Right. Right. No, I think you make a very good point there, and the one thing that I've come to recognize as being significant is the economy, because I've heard a number of people interviewed, voters, just regular citizens, who have said that part of the reason they are thinking about voting for Trump again is because for them the economy is better than it ever has been, or at least as good as it's ever been. And, last week, for example, the stock market hit a record. Now, that's not the economy, I understand, but it symbolizes the fact that the economy continues to be strong, even though only a few people are profiting from it.
Sure. Yeah.
But a lot of people are working as a result of it. And the prospects are that they will continue to work. And for that and that alone, they'll vote this guy. They'll vote for this guy again, irrespective of the fact that they don't like him. I've been wrestling. One of the programs that I'm kind of trying to put together, I've been wrestling for a few days about evangelicals and the contradiction between Trump, the person, and the philosophy, the philosophical base of evangelicals. The fact that they're supposed to be committed, ideologically solid Christians, and somehow they're able to rationalize voting for this guy who seems to violate every principle, every piece of dogma that they claim they stand for. And that has bothered me a lot. It continues to confuse me a little bit. I was reading President Trump gave the commencement address at Liberty University at the end of May. I think it was late in May. And Jerry Falwell Jr. is the president there. And he gave this glowing introduction to Donald Trump and talked about this, painting Donald Trump as the victim of this witch hunt, these unfair attacks from a number of different sources, as everybody seems to be doing what they can do to tear this president down and bring his administration down and all the rest of it. And Falwell Jr. even made reference to demons and talked about the fact that these anti-Trump people are demons. They're agents of the devil. And somehow this puts Donald Trump at a level which suggests that the only way to prevent the Antichrist from taking over is to keep him in office.
Yeah, it puts him in the armor of God somehow.
It's frightening. It's absolutely frightening.
And yet, the frightening thing is that they can actually pull that off when you look at his personal history of how he's conducted his life up to the point of anything, basically. Even today, he still doesn't go to church. I mean, you could look at Obama. Well, I mean, like a gratuitous, comparison would be kind of, whatever. But I mean, even during his presidency, he still continued to attend church services during his presidency. But Donald Trump has never even pretended.
No.
The evangelical community is led by cults of personality, basically, and the heads of those cults are allied with Donald Trump, and they have decided that he's their guy, and that's basically it. And after that, everything on down is just how they manage their herd. And that's really all that there is to it.
How they manage their herd and how they rationalize his behavior, because he continues to do things and say things.
You have to comment on it occasionally. Like, why does Donald Trump have 4 wives and mistresses, and it has to pay off porn stars? And they're like, oh well, it's because when you're one of Jesus' favorite people, sometimes you have to do this.
Yeah.
That's it. There's a way to explain all these
Right.
things if
And,
that's what you want.
and Christianity, as we know, provides all those ways.
Sure.
If you're willing to dig them up, the
It's
assumption,
the path of forgiveness. That's
yeah,
it.
the assumption that we're all fallen beings, and we all are eligible, or it's possible to for all of us to reform, to see the
Right.
light, and he's an example of that. And I mean, I've been taken lately with the women's soccer World Cup victory, um,
Yeah.
and the fact that Michelle Obama sent a beautiful congratulatory um, message to the team, to the U.S. women's team. And Melania Trump sent them congratulations as well, but Donald did not, because he's into a personal spitting
Feud.
contest.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
with one of the
With
people
Megan
on the
Rapinoe.
team.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, it's unbelievable, and it goes on and on. And then now we've got the Jeff Epstein situation, and the fact that his Secretary of Labor gave Epstein a pass in 2008 for behavior that's horrendous, and and the connections between Epstein and Donald Trump are increasingly being made. And then yesterday, the media is showing a video of a talk that the president, a dinner that the president invited guests, a dinner that was held at the Treasury Department for, I can't remember for whom, but sitting at the head table, two places away from Donald Trump, was Bob Kraft, the president of the New England Patriots, who's been accused, and there apparently are videos demonstrating his guilt of of this business of visiting these massage parlors and stuff. The same thing that Jeff Epstein is doing. So you got the Kraft, Epstein, Trump connection right in front of us this past weekend. And I'm thinking, my God, it'll never end. And yet the evangelical community continues to plunge forward, keeping its head down. They just don't want to see, they don't want to look, they don't want to deal with. It's absolutely amazing to me. Absolutely amazing. But at the same time, it is kind of frightening, because it tends to demonstrate how difficult it's going to be to move this. It's becoming so entrenched. It's hard to know how you
Move?
move it.
What do you mean by move? I mean, like, do you mean?
Well, okay. Let me give you one example. I've mentioned a couple of times on the air, but I've been thinking for a long time. I can't believe that there are 54 members of the United States Senate, all of whom have made the decision to toady up to this guy and do whatever he says, no matter what it is. I can't believe that there aren't members of the Senate who at some point in time are going to say, I can't take any more of this. This is doing more harm than good. We've reached a point where I can't go along with this anymore. There's got to be senators there who believe that.
I wondered that too.
There. It's the same. I feel the same way about the Supreme Court. Everybody talks about Roberts as being the swing vote now that Kennedy's retired, and that the other four conservatives are in concrete, and there's the four liberals, and the swing vote is Roberts. And I keep saying to myself, there has got to be within that court, within those justices, a sense of institutional commitment or loyalty that's greater than this. I just can't believe that they have become political ideologues, and in the process surrendered their background, their careers, their legitimacy, everything. I just can't believe that. I can't. Why does everybody begin to say Roberts is the only one that we can trust to move from back and forth between the two camps? What about the others? Why aren't we seeing Alito stand up at some point and saying, wait a minute, I'll go this far, but no further, or I don't expect Clarence Thomas to do that, But you have Alito and you have Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, somebody, it would seem to me, ought to have the integrity and commitment to the profession, to their role as justices whose job is to objectively interpret the law and begin to say, damn it, that's the job I'm supposed to be doing, not going along with whatever decisions are coming from outside the court, from the White House. I just can't believe that there aren't members of that court or members of the Senate, Republican members of the Senate, who are there, who at some point will speak up. But so far, I'm wrong. They haven't spoken up yet. The one guy that did it was that congressman from Michigan, who this end of last week left the party. Now there's word that he's talking about running against Trump for the Republican nomination. I don't.
Right.
I don't know whether that's going to go anywhere, but
it won't.
Hey, we come a long way from Deng Xiaoping and and Xi.
Look at this.
Look at us, I'm telling you. So what any other things that are on your plate or on your mind or whatever?
Oh no, honestly, Dr. Bill, I just want to have a chance to shoot the bull with you for a while.
Hey, listen, I love it. I absolutely love it, and I've missed it. I know you're busy, and I appreciate you calling when you can call. But I just relish these conversations because I learned so much from them, from you. Just the questions you ask and the points you make are so perceptive. It's really exhilarating, and I want you to know that. I really appreciate it. So
well, my time here is a highlight of my I don't even know how to say it. And Bob and Agnes and we talk about this back channel, and it's great for me. So
well, I'm guessing that in Bob's case, his program is on when you're getting up a lot of times in the morning.
Well, yeah, I mean it's it's almost 2:30 a.m. here as far as that goes.
Right.
Yeah, Bob, his program starts right about 6 a.m. something like that, and I got stuff to do at that time.
Yeah.
For the most part.
So we're getting you on the other end.
On the other end, and the other end is not always my best.
I can understand that. Believe me, I can understand that. But I just want you to know. I know Agnes mentioned that you might be calling in today, and I said, "Oh my God, I just appreciate it so much because I know it's not easy for you to do, and it adds so much to everybody's appreciation of the quality of the program, and I just appreciate it so much."
Well, Dr. Bell, every chance I get a chance to talk, to call in and talk to you, so that's wonderful for me. So
well, thank you, because I just want you to know that I can reciprocate that from this end, because I love it. And when you do come on like this, for the next couple of days, there'll be reactions to things you said and ideas you had and suggestions you made and possibilities you raised that keep you here days after you've gone back to La La Land, back to your normal, back to your normal schedule. So I just appreciate it so much.
Okay.
You listen. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. I'll check out now. And
you made my day.
So much.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate that. We're at 2:30, just coming on 2:30. We've got about 30 minutes more in our program today on this Tuesday, and I have to be honest with you. I've got a few things on my plate. I had a few things on my plate, which will obviously I will wait till tomorrow. But I can't. Nothing on my plate's going to top the last hour. So hour and 15 minutes. So I acknowledge that going in. One of the things I mentioned that I had this on my plate, and I did already mention it in conversation with Horst. So let me, let me kind of revisit it and if I can. And this is the issue of Trump leaving office or not leaving office. And in the course of the conversation that we just had with Horst, I mentioned a couple of things that it seems to me are related to this. As this idea of adding the census question has continued to fester, a week after it appeared that the Supreme Court had put the issue to rest, it begins to speak to me about how real the threats really are that something unprecedented could happen around this 2020 election. The two extreme possibilities, one on the one end and one on the other. The one we've been talking about is that the president loses the election but refuses to give up his office. Lawrence Tribe raises the other possibility, which is Trump is reelected, and then documented evidence begins to surface that there were election irregularities that was so prevalent and so visible that they clearly call the results of the election into jeopardy. They ultimately raise questions about the legitimacy of the outcome. And so the issue is, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with the political realities of the Electoral College? I can remember, and I know I've mentioned this on the program before, I can remember in the 80s, the early 80s, I took a group of students to Washington, D.C. from Richmond, and we were attending a conference hosted by an organization that was committed to the idea, I can't remember the exact title of it, but it was an idea that included in its title such and such an organization dedicated to the study of the presidency. And this was a 3-day panel discussion, a series of breakout sessions on the issue of the presidency itself. This was in the early 80s. This was during the early years of the Reagan administration, so to speak. I can remember, for example, every time I turn on NPR in the evening and see Judy Woodruff, I think back to this. Because I can remember at that conference that it was that very weekend that Judy Woodruff, who even at that time was anchor for NPR, National Public Radio, on the television, PBS. She used to do the PBS broadcast in the evening. I can remember that during that conference, she got back from her honeymoon and married the opinion writer for, I believe it was, at that time it was the Wall Street Journal. And I can't remember his name. I can see him, but I can't remember his name. White hair, dark rimmed glasses, etc. They got married right at that particular time. And they had returned from their honeymoon, and together they hosted a panel on issues related to the presidency, the study of the presidency. And of course, at that time, people were speculating on what was going to happen with the Reagan presidency against the background of 4 years of President Jimmy Carter. And a lot of people were speculating about the powers of the office and the fact that Jimmy Carter was not the reason his presidency, in terms of its success, raised serious questions, because he was not a delegator. He was not willing. He was one of those people that was bright enough that he believed that he could be on every solution to every problem, et cetera, and that ultimately that may have been the downfall of his administration. And this was going to change with Ronald Reagan, because Ronald Reagan did not have the kind of political background that would convince him that he was the authority who had the answers to everything. That unlike Jimmy Carter, Reagan was more inclined to delegate power to his cabinet, to members of his cabinet, to leaders in Congress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the result was going to be that the whole nature of the presidency would change as the nation moved into and through the 80s. because of the change in the presidency. And I can remember that conference so well, and the students that we brought up to Richmond, because they were enthralled. It was a bus. It was only 2-hour bus ride from Richmond to Washington. And these students were enthralled because many of the people that they had seen on television, on the evening news, for example, were on these panels, and they were getting to see and hear them live and actually ask them questions. And they were overwhelmed by that. So, as was I. And so I can remember that very well. But every time I see Judy Woodruff, I think back to that particular period and to that organization that was committed to the study of the presidency. It was founded in the 50s during the presidency of Dwight Eisenhower. And I don't know whether the organization continues to even exist anymore. I hadn't heard from it since I left Richmond at the beginning of the 90s. But as I think about what's happening to the presidency right now, and I see these things happening, like the issue with the census question, I think back to that organization and say, boy, if that organization doesn't still exist, somebody needs to reinstitute it or recreate it, because there are so many things going on that people need to begin to nail down and study and investigate and write about, so that we can document the story of what's happening right now and what's happening to the presidency, and theoretically what might be happening to our Constitution, and to the rule of law and all the other things that are going on right now. And I specifically keep thinking of Nancy Pelosi holding off the troops, so to speak, on the issue of impeachment. And let me just make a comment that a couple of weeks ago, it may have been 2 weeks ago, it may have been a little bit less than that, maybe about 10 days ago, when Jerry Nadler announced that on Wednesday the 17th, a week from this Wednesday, a week from tomorrow, Robert Mueller had agreed to come and testify before two different House committees, the Intelligence Committee and the Judiciary Committee. The nation was going to get an opportunity to it being exposed to a full day with Robert Mueller. And many of the things that are in the Mueller report that many people haven't read, they would begin to hear now as a result of Mueller's scheduled July 17th appearance before these two committees of Congress. And I can remember at the time speculating that what that is going to do is take the air out of the balloon that was continuing to inflate over the issue of impeachment. If you remember, more and more people were coming out publicly and declaring their support for impeachment. But with the announcement that by Mueller that he would be appearing on July 17th, all of a sudden the question of impeachment moved to the back burner. And people seem to almost have concluded, let's put that one in the background for now, and let's focus principally on the upcoming testimony of Robert Mueller. So by making this announcement 3 weeks in advance, Jerry Nadler effectively slowed down the push towards impeachment. And that has bothered me, because I've made it very clear that I think right now impeachment, it's the one weapon that we've been given to deal with what's going on. And if you put that weapon into a locked safe and save it for later, then what you do is empower this president to continue to behave in ways which overstep or violate constitutional borders or boundaries all over the place. One of the things that the issue of impeachment continues to focus on is the question of obstruction of justice. back to the census question, the president's refusal to adhere to the decision reached by the Supreme Court on adding the census question. The president making the decision unilaterally that he chooses not to accept the verdict of the court. Not only that, but he tells his Justice Department not to accept it either, but rather to proceed, trying to find ways to get that question added. Monday, it was announced that the entire legal staff of the Justice Department that had been focused on the issue of the census question has been replaced. And the speculation is that these professionals, these attorneys, Justice Department attorneys, had gone out on the limb for the president in terms of making the argument to the Supreme Court, which the president, and more specifically the Commerce Department, and its head, its secretary, Wilbur Ross, wanted made before the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court had rejected the rationale for adding this question. And President Trump had said, based on the invitation of John Roberts in his Supreme Court majority decision, to come back to the court with a better rationale, a more reasonable rationale for adding the question. President put out the word that he wanted his legal staff in the Justice Department to come up with that rationale, that new rationale. And at the time, I was thinking last week when this first came out, put yourself in the position of one of these attorneys. As a professional who over and over again is going to have to go before the courts to argue a case, argue a position or a perspective. If you follow through on the president's Twitter message to find an alternative justification for adding this citizenship question to the census, then you are effectively acknowledging that when you first went to the Supreme Court and made the case that you needed the question there in order to better implement the Voting Rights Act, you were committing a lie. You were lying to the Supreme Court. If you go back with a new rationale, you're acknowledging that you were lying the first time. Not only that, but you're suggesting, I lied the first time and here I am back again with another justification. Chances are I'm lying again. This would ruin the legal reputation and the legitimacy of these attorneys for the rest of their full-time jobs as attorneys. They couldn't hold their head up in front of a judge again ever once they did this. So apparently they made the decision that they weren't going to follow the president. Rather, they were going to abide by the decision that John Roberts had reached. And as a reaction to that, the president removed the entire bunch of them and replaced them with a whole new group of lawyers whose job is to come up with the rationale that he demanded for adding these questions to the census, accompanied by the president's promise that if necessary, he would postpone the census in order to give these attorneys time to prosecute this new approach to the Supreme Court. If that's true, and the media is speculating that most of it is probably true, that means that the president has behaved in ways on this particular issue which suggests that he believes he's above the law. He's above what the Supreme Court has dictated the interpretation of the Constitution in this particular case is all about. He's refused to accept it. He's basically said as much that he's willing, by executive order, to order the Commerce Department to add this question and postpone the census itself in violation of the Constitution's mandate that the census happen this election year, 2020. He's willing to violate the Constitution in order to impose his will over the decision of a majority of the Supreme Court. I'm not an attorney, but this seems to me to suggest something coming very close to obstruction of justice. Because if he's not enabled or allowed to do this and to make it happen and postpone the census and get the question added, then he has effectively announced to the nation that the law is what he says it is, not what the Supreme Court says it is. And when you put this into the context of realistic speculation on the part of many, Lawrence Tribe being one, that we may be well be facing a political situation in this country where even if the president loses the election, he's likely to resist the will of the people to leave office. Then this whole census question situation seems to speak to the president's inclination to do just that. I think that the president's behavior in this particular situation related to the census and the addition of the citizenship question increases the likelihood that the election of 2020, we may think that's the definitive scheme for a change in the presidency. But he may disagree with us. And his actions leading up to this point suggest that that's becoming more and more likely, less and less just a possibility. And it concerns me deeply. And when you combine that with voter suppression evidences throughout the country, with rampant gerrymandering, with the fact that the Republicans continue to control 29 of the state's 50 legislatures, which means that because the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 conservative victory, Chief Justice Roberts voting with the conservatives this time, has pretty much decided that the court has no place in the political questions related to political gerrymandering. The court has effectively given the green light to Republican majorities in 29 state legislatures to gerrymander away without fear of interference or obstruction in any way from the courts. And you look at $100 million campaign slush fund, if you will, coupled with gerrymandering, coupled with efforts at voter suppression, coupled with the makeup of the Electoral College, and the fact that there are 20 rural middle American states that the polls tell us are solidly red. That effectively means that 40 Republican senators over and over again are almost a sure thing. Which means that you only need 10 more than that to get 50-50 in the Senate. And thereby you are able to rely on the vote of Vice President Michael Pence to break a tie. Then we begin to realize how difficult winning the 2020 election away from this president is going to be. And even if we do it, there's a growing inclination that he won't leave anyway. And I think that when you begin to put all of those things together, it'll keep you up at night. In effect, it's already keeping me up at night. Because I have a long-term professional career commitment to this Constitution and the government that it created. And I'm beginning to see this thing being torn to shreds, piece by piece by piece, day by day by day. And the only weapon that the Constitution gives us to stop it is impeachment. And Democratic leaders have decided to put impeachment in a lockbox for the foreseeable future, pending the day-long testimony of Robert Mueller on the 17th of this month. Once Mueller does appear, once we move into July 18th and begin to savor the things that Mueller has told us the day before, the promise being, of course, that most of what he tells us is going to be in the Mueller report already. Then the next issue on the agenda is the election itself. Because I think there is kind of an assumption, an optimistic assumption on the part of many Democrats that once the American people begin to hear from Mueller's own lips many of the things that he's already written into the Mueller report, people are going to come to appreciate why this election in 2020 is so important. And that's when people are going to look to the ballot box to resolve our problems by getting rid of the existing office holder. And that's when all of these other things we've been talking about, like the war chest and the gerrymandering and the addition of the census question and all these other things come into play. And people realize that even with the election, you can't unseat this guy. Not that easily. There's a lesson here. In spite of the fact that candidate Donald Trump, through 2015 and the early part of 2016, up to and including the election in November of 2016, most people believe, the polls told us, that Donald Trump didn't have a chance of winning. First, they told us that he didn't have a chance of even winning the nomination. And then after he won the nomination, these same polls continued to tell us that the election was a shoo-in. Hillary Clinton's win was a gimme. That the American people would never elect a Donald Trump to President of the United States, given his background, given his dubious background, personal, business, and other ways. Lack of political experience, lack of diplomatic experience, all the rest of it. Everybody assumed that the election of 2016 would right the ship, and it didn't. Now people are looking toward the next election, 2020, to do the same thing. If it didn't do it in 2016, it's becoming more than likely that it's not going to do it in 2020 either, especially given these other things like the war chest and the gerrymandering and the court and all the census question and all the rest of it. So I'm beginning to think that these optimistic Democrats who are putting all their eggs in the 2020 election basket are leaning on a weak reed. I really believe that there's more to be concerned about than their optimism leads them to believe or recognize. I don't want to appear to be given to conspiracies or to being overly negative or overly somber. But the fact of the matter is, if you are realistic, you can't help but be quite worried. And I am. We've got 2 minutes to go on our program. I just want to take the time that's left to thank. I know Horst is not with us anymore. He's probably, if he's smart, he's gone to sleep. Although if he's excited about some of the things he said, as I am, he can't sleep. I couldn't. But chances are he's probably not listening to the rest of the program right now. But on the remote chance that he might be, I just want to extend my thanks. And once again to say how much I appreciate the contribution that he's made to the program and to all of those people who continually and regularly listen to it. I think he brings so much to the table, and I appreciate it so very, very much. As I do our regular listeners, I thank you, as I try to do every time it occurs to me while we're on the air, to thank you for your continued support of the network and of this program. I think I'm close enough to appreciate the work that Bob Kincaid and Agnes do to keep this network and this program on the air. But I also know that it's important for the people who listen to the program to appreciate that as well. And so when you appreciate them and when you support the program, as you do so generously and so faithfully, I want you to know how much I appreciate that, how much this program and its future depends on your continued support. So thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of this beautiful day in July, and everything works out properly. We'll be back together again tomorrow here on the Virtual Center. Thank you so very, very much. Have a good day.